showcasing local talent, professionals, and everyday people making Salt Lake City what it is today. It's time for another episode of the I Am Salt Lake podcast.
In 1 month, we're recording this right now. It's November 6th. Mm-hmm. 1 month from today is my birthday.
It's your birthday.
And, you know, it's kind of one of those birthdays that it's kind of like, it's a bit of a wake-up call where I'm like, okay, I'm going to be turning 39 years old. I have one more year in my 30s. I feel like I need to start creating a bucket list. Is that like an old man thing? It's to create a bucket list?
No, I think that's awesome, and it's appropriate at any age.
Because it's one of those things where it's like, I have to start living life more. I mean, it's always been my anthem, right? Like, live life to the fullest. Do this. Don't get pushed around. You know, you only have one shot to live. But how many of us really truly do that? I know I don't do it as well as I could.
My bucket list is to like be stable now, so I'm doing a good job.
And then there's like me, I have like TV shows on my bucket list. Like that's what my life has become. Like it's like, oh well, I'm going to add this TV show to my.
I'd say sadly,
is that what most of us are in our 30s?
I think
you
so.
know what I mean? It's like, okay, I have to conquer 8 seasons of a TV show.
Yeah, like you have to see The Walking Dead at some point. I'm sure you don't have to.
No, so, you know, I don't know. I just kind of wanted to share that. Like, it's kind of this thing. I'm waking up and I'm like, well, you know what? I'm going to be turning 39 years old. Mm-hmm. It's time to start getting out there and creating more goals. I'm a goal-oriented person.
Oh, you are.
But I could definitely do a lot better.
And like now's the time to really make the bucket list, because you're not too old and you're not too young.
Yeah.
You're just the right age where you could actually make cool bucket list items and do it.
Like go on a cruise, go to Africa.
Climb the Eiffel Tower, you know.
Let's welcome everybody out today to episode 250 of I Am Salt Lake Podcast. I'm Chris Hollifield.
And I'm Chrissy Shelley.
Today on the podcast, we sit down and chat with Randin Graves. He's a local musician, film composer, and didgeridooist.
I like that term.
Is that I think I refer to that in the interview.
Do you?
It's like, is that a word? Didgeridooist.
If it's not, it should be, because it's cool.
Wasn't this an awesome conversation though that we had? Like, so when I started connecting with Randin, he's telling me I lived with aborigines for 5 years in Australia. I play the didgeridoo. I do all this stuff. And then now I live in Salt Lake City.
I know. It's just like, I wonder if he's just regretting everything right now. Just sitting in Salt Lake, like, what have I done?
But I'm
just kidding. Salt Lake's awesome.
I have to bring him on I Am Salt Lake. I had to bring him on this podcast.
Yeah.
Have him share his story. And so I was excited. Did you? I mean, was it an awesome conversation?
It was awesome. And honestly, I feel like we didn't even hit the tip of the iceberg. I'm so fascinated with his 5 years with the Aborigines. And I mean, I would just love to be a fly on the wall. He tried to explain it to us, but I don't know if there's any way you can really explain that.
No. And I mean, we kept going back. I mean, there was so much in this conversation. And then now his new band that he's doing, Sidecar Judy. We get into that in the conversation. We even play a song at the very end of this podcast.
Yeah,
and he actually plays the didgeridoo on the recording. He does. It seems like it came out when I was going back through and editing the interview. It seems like it came out okay.
It was really fun to listen back to it and to listen to it the first time.
Before we get into that, though, Chrissy, let's give some love to our sponsors.
Absolutely,
they are wonderful people. Oleo Skin and Beard. I know we're going to mention them, but a happy birthday, Derek.
I know. Happy birthday.
Today is his birthday, actually.
Yes.
And we sang him happy birthday at the live show we did last night. We'll get into that after the interview with Randin. But Oleo Skin and Beard, oleoskin.com is a website. I use all their beard oils.
Yep.
They even have bar soap now.
They do, and I use their bar soap every day. Bar soap.
You use a lot of their other cleansing sprays.
I do. And actually, my sister just messaged me 2 days ago and said she's going to order more Oleo because it's been the best on her and her daughter's skin of anything that they've ever tried. And severe acne runs in their family. And this has been the best thing that has helped.
Isn't she up in Alaska?
Yeah, she's in Alaska, so she's ordering it online now.
See, and that's just proof. Go to oleoskin.com. Order your products right there. They'll ship it right to your doorstep.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful world we live in that you don't even have to leave your house to buy products.
I know. And I really want to promote it, especially for teenage girls and teenage boys.
And big boys
and
with
big boys and girls
big
too.
boys with big beards.
But oh yeah, that too.
Anyway, oleoskin.com. We love those guys. Happy birthday, Derek.
Happy birthday.
Distillery 36. Gotta love Brigham rum. We're drinking some today.
Yes, we are.
We drank some last night at the live show.
did.
We'll talk about that, like I said, after the interview. But love these guys as well.
You're wearing their hat right now.
I'm wearing a Distillery 36 hat.
I love it.
Drinking the booze. Distillery36.com. You can buy it at all the local state liquor stores, I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
And I know they have it at the Hideout Pub and Grub now. You can request it there.
They do. Yeah, they made some good drinks last night with it.
We're going to talk about that after the interview.
Yeah.
So our live show last night, it happened. It was awesome. Like I said, I want to talk more about it, though. I want to get into that interview, though, with Randin Graves, though.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll talk about that. Does that sound good to you?
That sounds great to me.
All right, guys. Let's jump into that conversation now with Randin Graves, where we talk aborigines, didgeridoo, Australia, and even the life of a film composer. So here we go. Thanks for listening. I like to even kind of go back a little bit, find out where's home. Where do you call home? Where's that for you?
Mostly home sweet home is San Diego, where I spent most of my life, most of my first 30 years. And then I definitely consider Yirrkala a second home. It's Aboriginal community I lived in for 5 years on the north coast of Australia.
Let's I want to stop for
there.
Just a second. And maybe, I mean, I guess so then you, after that, you came to Utah, right?
Yep.
But the transition, okay, so from San Diego, you went to Australia.
Yep. So I guess that goes back a little further. So I got into the didgeridoo, the wonderful traditional instrument of Northern Australian Aboriginal people. Actually, I first heard it in high school. My mother taught aerobics to senior citizens through a community college, and one of her students went to Australia and brought back a cassette tape and said, "Your son's into weird music, have him listen to this." And so I had this sound in my head, but I didn't know what one looked like. Then when I studied music at UC San Diego, I took a seminar called The Unusual in World Music, which was just a couple of weeks of listening to the craziest stuff people had figured out how to do all around the world with both voice and instruments. Didgeridoo was used as the crossover, and he demonstrated on PVC pipe, which makes great starter didgeridoos. Just 4 feet of 1.25 inch PVC from Home Depot is a great starter didgeridoo. So it just kind of took over a lot of my musical interest at the time.
At a very young age.
At the beginning of college.
Okay.
And I had my first chance to do a sort of pilgrimage to the origins in 1999, which is not just Australia, but it really comes from the far north. It's where the instrument really originated. So at the time of European contact, they know that it wasn't in the rest of the country, even though it's in the rest of the country now, and it's in your Foster's beer commercials.
It was just in the northern part of the country.
Yep. So that was sort of the main target of my first trip, and then just got sucked in. They also have in addition to didgeridoos, they have a really elaborate kinship system where everybody is related, and everybody is related to every species of tree and animal and shape of thundercloud and all that. Like the whole universe is family. And if you spend any amount of time with them, they adopt you into it. And that really tugs your heartstrings. That you get sucked into that really quickly, all these brothers and mothers. And
so when you went there originally, did you go mainly to learn more about the didgeridoo, or were you more curious about the origins and you wanted to actually understand the culture behind it?
A little bit of both. I mean, the didgeridoo was the first thing. It was the thing that sucked me in, but then it didn't. Then the culture became more interesting once I was there.
Yeah.
What was it about the didgeridoo that sucked you in the most?
Couple of things. First of all, I was a self-taught musician at a very snooty avant-garde music school, and I didn't really realize it. I knew that UC San Diego was a well-respected new music program, and as a high school student, I didn't really know what that meant.
Sure.
I thought that meant like cool MIDI stuff, cool synthesizer stuff or something. I didn't know that it meant like using mathematical equations to write your music and, things like this. So on the one hand, I was exposed to this. It's just a tube, and you can become a virtuosic player of this tube.
Sure.
And that sort of fascinated me. That sort of gave me a role in this more avant-garde university in a way. And I was just really intrigued by that. Just like, as one of the instrument makers that I became good friends with said, it's not so much an instrument, because with most instruments, you're learning how to manipulate the moving parts of that instrument.
Yeah.
Whereas with this, you are the moving parts of the instrument. So that's what you're learning how to play. So there's something really satisfying about that.
It's just a tube. Like there's
It's a
no
tube.
I've only seen a didgeridoo from afar until now.
Yeah.
And you manipulate it all with just your vocal cords
Your
and
breath, your tongue, your stomach muscles, your voice.
Well, do you remember those plastic horns that you would get at like
the whistles?
yeah, and you would just kind of have to pucker your lips up and is that kind of what you do with the
like that.
didgeridoo?
It's very relaxed. For the low sound, it's as opposed to.
What's the average time that a person can play? Like 30 minutes without going, getting lightheaded?
Without passing out.
It depends on.
No, I mean,
it depends on what you're doing.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure you build yourself up strength. And,
Yeah, and there's this fancy trick called circular breathing where you're. The way most people learn to start is you store air in your cheeks and you squeeze it out, so you can play the instrument for a second just with that.
Yeah.
So you're not breathing. So you breathe in through your nose to fill up your lungs while you're squeezing air out of your mouth.
Sure.
This will make a lot of sense to people listening, but you can see in person. So I'll.
It's like a bagpipe, but your mouth is the
cheek
bag.
is the bag. That's actually what I say.
Oh,
when
really?
When I teach
Yeah.
people, I call it the bagpipe technique.
Interesting.
So yeah, you can play forever, but it depends on how aggressive you're being, and But yeah.
So what was your first instrument then? Because you play
keyboards,
okay, so you
guitars,
play
more normal
multiple instruments.
More normal.
Even. What was your first instrument?
Casio VL Tone with the little calculator keys makes that famous kind of drum beat thing. It's kind of
Really?
Very 80s.
And you learned how to play music
I learned
with
how
it.
to pick out notes on that, and then my grandmother supported that, and then it was to the slightly larger Casio keyboard, and so
Wow.
hunt and peck notes.
Did you take lessons at a young age?
didn't.
Then all self-taught.
Yeah, all self-taught, which I appreciated in music school because although I felt really behind in a lot of other ways, it was really interesting that we had a required improvisation class, and just how many of the classically trained from childhood people just couldn't deal with a blank page.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. There were things that were good about my ear training, even though I did feel disadvantaged in other ways. Yeah.
Back to the didgeridoo, because this
We didn't even get to moving there. So I made a couple quick after that first visit. I made a couple more visits, and got more and more sucked in
to Australia.
Yeah, to that specific culture and a specific family that adopted my wife and I.
So she went over with you.
She went with me, yeah.
That's awesome.
Before we were married the first time, and then we were married for the rest of them. And we just got more and more sucked in, and all we could make was fairly brief visits originally. And so, okay, we need to really figure out what this means to us for the long term. And I did a long distance graduate certificate program at Northern Territory University. It was called at the time. It's now Charles Darwin University, the only school in the world offering a language and culture program in this Aboriginal group that I became connected with. And through that, I applied to do a master's program and a Fulbright fellowship, which I won, which was very exciting. Fulbright basically pays for a year study abroad and living expenses and travel and such, and hooks you up with, we would spend time at the U.S. Embassy to Australia and have amazing opportunities through that. And you're also supposed to sign a thing that says that you're coming back home after your year, because it's an exchange program, but I didn't come back home.
Oh.
So,
Did you get
so we
in
went
trouble?
for that year. No.
Oh.
No. I went for that year and volunteered at a community art center over there. It's one of the leading remote Aboriginal art centers, selling paintings on bark, carvings, didgeridoos, other Aboriginal crafts. Volunteered as part of my project there, and essentially the job opened up, so sponsored me to stay.
So they have a thriving culture still.
Yeah, so the other thing about the didgeridoo coming from the north is the north was left alone a long time. Mm-hmm. It's semi-tropical. It's sort of, in a lot of ways, it's more what you'd think of as Southeast Asia than the Australian outback. Okay. It's eucalyptus forest and jungly areas on the beach. And it's the last place, that the very north tropical coast and sort of western desert, middle of nowhere, were the last places that Europeans got. So these people were pretty much left alone until like 1930s. So they're still growing up, speaking their languages and doing ceremony. And
so do you speak their language then?
Yeah, a little bit.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's okay? This is how ignorant I am.
Okay.
What's the language called?
Aborigine.
Oh, obviously.
No, I don't know. Is it?
Well, it's just like Native Americans here.
Yeah.
It's easy to think of like one group, but there's like hundreds.
Okay. Yeah.
So
no, that makes sense.
In this little corner, it's the Yolngu cultural group. So I speak one of the dialects of the Yolngu language.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can you say something cool?
Something cool. Yo, ngaranja Randin aku ngara San Diego pui balanda pili, margi ngara Yolngu mato. So I just said,
I totally agree with everything you just said.
How cool would it be if I had a listener right now that spoke your language, that language?
I would love to hear from that person later on, because
yeah, if you do, please reach out to. I'll put all your contact information with this episode. And
actually, there was a close call. There was I've done annual things up at Weber County Libraries.
Sure.
And this woman came one time and said she was a linguist. She was an older woman. Said when she was younger, she was working as a linguist in study, and just out of the blue, when they had to pick a little known language for a project, she found this book, she said, on an Aboriginal language, and she couldn't remember what it was called, but said, it was written by, she was like a nurse who began studying on this island, studying the language before anybody else did. And I said, Bulalo. Yeah. That's
Wow.
That's a Yolngu language that you were studying. Yeah, that was my first textbook in this program that this woman in Ogden had.
Did she remember any of it?
She didn't know.
Oh,
I think it was sort of like a one semester project 30 years ago or something.
So did you start learning it? But I'm just so curious. Did you start learning it before you went there, or did you kind of just engulf yourself in their culture and learn that way?
Yeah, not really before. Since I had 3 short visits first. So on the first visit, I sort of picked up my 10 words kind of thing. And then this university that I was talking about actually were just launching their first online course in it. So I got in on the beta test of the online delivery of the course between my first and second visit, which was very cool. And I found a lot of video materials that had, language being spoken.
So you did a lot of self-study kind of that way?
Yep.
Wow.
But guided self-study with the university thing. And then when I got back, they were very impressed with me. And then I lived there for 5 years and worked very closely in a place where there weren't that many white people. So
this is going to be a pretty basic question, I'm sure, but what was the hardest, Australia. Mm-hmm. Is it a tough place to adjust to move to? Say somebody in Salt Lake City. Mm-hmm. You've lived here for a minute. We haven't even gotten into what brought you to Salt Lake City. But let's say someone's lived here for a majority of their life. They were to move to Australia. What would be maybe a couple things that would be hard to adjust to? Or is that kind of a hard question?
Australia or the remote north is the question.
Yeah, definitely the remote north.
I guess that's a completely different, because what is there big cities there?
Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide.
And you didn't live in any of the cities. You were kind of
we were out there. There was a population varying on season.
So did you live in a house or a...
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, for the first 4 years, it was a pretty a grim one. It was sort of a double wide that was built in the 60s to last 20 years.
So it wasn't like a mud hut.
No. It was not a village kind of thing. It was a small,
I'm picturing like Lord of the Flies here, right?
Yeah.
You remember that movie, right?
There's an element of that in many of the houses. There's big overcrowding in Aboriginal homes.
Sure.
Yeah, it can be rough, but it was wonderful. I mean, I was a Southern California suburban boy, and it was very odd for me to end up there.
Yeah. Was it shocking to you at first?
Yeah, the first visit in particular was pretty shocking.
Like what? I mean, that's what I'm trying to. I mean, I know that's hard. I don't know. I mean, because they speak English, but
yeah, there's varying degrees with that.
Well, besides the language you spoke.
Oh, for Australia, yeah. For white Australians, they speak pretty much the same language.
Are there crocodile? Are there people like Mick Dundee there? Crocodile
there's
Dundee,
actually,
right? I mean,
there's one. There's one guy I met.
Chrissy's over here laughing.
There's one guy I met who was pretty close. Peter Brady was his name. He's hilarious. He just did crazy.
That's
mad
a good crocodile
bushman.
hunter name.
Yeah, and he did that. He did not crocodile hunting exactly, but crocodile egg hunting. Hired for a crocodile farm for managing their stock, I guess, for making purses or whatever. I don't know. And also for scientific research purposes. So he has many stories. I only have one story of running away from a crocodile, but he has many.
Are there a lot of
I
know there's so many questions. We're just like throwing boom, boom. Well, we've never had an Australian on the podcast.
We haven't, and we're probably never going to go on vacation there. So this is all we get.
You should.
We totally should.
Yeah.
But I mean, were there a lot of alligators up on the north side?
Yeah,
there?
crocodiles.
Crocodiles. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and growing more in numbers for the past 20, 30 years since killing them was outlawed.
Is it kind of a threat to that civilization up there? Or is it just something they've learned to live with?
Yeah, you learn to live with it. I mean, somebody dies every year or so in the community. And,
it's like
not
Florida?
In the community. Yeah. Well, to be honest, it's usually a German tourist.
Oh.
They've earned a reputation everywhere we've been.
Specifically
German
Germans.
tourists trying to be too adventurous. It happens. And it was actually, I mentioned I had one story of running from a crocodile myself, and it was actually a German visitor who
found it?
got us into the situation. So it almost.
That's so weird. It's like they have a strange magnet.
Yeah. Just try to be too adventurous. Yeah. So yeah, it's a problem there. Well, it's not a problem. It's just like
everyone has their stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
That's just theirs.
I often say that the culture of it, the sort of the drama of living there, it's like Native American reservations in a lot of ways. Where there's introduced alcohol problems and introduced drug problems and economic problems of how do they make their way in this sort of in-between place between first world and third world that they're stuck in. So you have such incredible, like, depressing stuff happening, but then such incredible beauty. And, like, it's the same with the people, the experiences you have living with the people there. And just, like, the perfect metaphor for it is the beach, which you'll just find the most beautiful white sand beach you've ever seen. But if you don't know what you're doing and you go in that water, you might die.
Yeah.
It's sort of like life there is kind of like that.
What was your favorite thing while you were there for the 5 years? Like, is there something that you miss more than anything?
Yeah, I mean, now you're in Salt Lake City. I mean, there's got to be
very
something.
different.
The widest place available.
Do you crave? Well, I guess answer Chrissy's question first.
It's very hard to answer. I mean, certainly there are people. I mean, the number one thing you miss would be people. But on a sort of a larger scale, just my wife and I often talk about missing living outdoors, which you can't do so much. You can in the summer here.
Right.
But even then, you've got your house that seals up with your air conditioning and things like that. But there, it was just a pretty flimsy house with just louvers, no wheel, little louvers and screens. And there's sort of like this and comfortable temperature.
It was like a really cheap cabin.
Yeah. Air's going through all the time. So it's just more sort of feeling like you're more
it doesn't
in the
snow
world.
there,
You're
does
outside.
it?
Oh, not remotely.
Yeah.
No. They basically, the white people talk about 2 seasons. The Aboriginal people talk about 6. The white people talk about the dry and the wet. So the dry, I often compared to summer at home in San Diego. So humid, but not super humid. But then around September, October, November, you have what they call the buildup, which is every day it gets hotter and more humid than the last day, every day, and it gets unbearable. They have a term, going tropo, which means going crazy from the tropics.
Tropical?
And so, what kind of temperatures are we talking here? Hundreds? 80s?
Probably around 100. I mean,
Okay.
of course, they talk in, 30, 36,
Celsius, right?
37,
Yeah,
30,
yes.
but super high humidity. So yeah, you just sweat all day and take a couple showers a day. And
Do you ever think of going back, moving
oh yeah, all the
back?
time. Actually, we were just before we had to come back to the States, we got dual citizenship sorted out. So
That's awesome.
we're going back for sure. It's just a question of when.
Depending on what happens with our country here. No, we don't need to get
I didn't know if we were going to get into politics
no,
or
well,
not.
we don't need to get into politics.
But I have said actually I had
Very
a friend
topical.
I had a friend on Facebook recently who posted about, oh, when are you going to visit Australia? Your family here misses you. Her birthday is on November 11th. So I said, we might be coming for your birthday, actually.
Prepare a house, get it ready.
No, I mean, is that tough to get dual citizenship like that?
It is.
Yeah, I mean,
Australia
I wouldn't imagine it
Seems
to
like
be
it'd be hard.
easy.
Yeah, Australia doesn't really want Americans in general. They want you to come and spend your money and leave.
Right.
So there's an elaborate system. So if you are a nurse or a refrigeration technician and you're willing to work in more remote areas, then there's a point system, and then you're basically in with there's certain desired
Depending on how much
professions.
they need
Or
you.
a didgeridooist.
But,
I
but
mean,
oddly
they need
enough,
those.
oddly enough, that's pretty much how I got in. So on the Fulbright,
That's awesome.
I was on the Fulbright as a didgeridoo researcher, expert, and studying the language and doing a master's at an Australian university. And the Art Center, this was the only Aboriginal Art Center that had ever hired a white didgeridoo guy before.
Wow.
And they built it. It was just sort of a small side thing and for the tourist market. And then he built it into like a couple $100,000 a year for the community and in sales by having the only place with a white guy who could evaluate the instruments and Western terms and price them and communicate to Western didgeridoo players in ways that the Aboriginal people couldn't. And basically he needed a break after a few years and I filled the slot. So they had a thing called the Regional Sponsored Migration Scheme. It's all government plans are called schemes there. It's it's fun.
They know how to word stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which basically that scheme was if you're in a remote place with not many people to hire and there's really specific skills need to fill the job, then you can bring somebody in. And so they said, we've already got this American here who speaks the language and plays the,
Yeah, you do all the things they need done.
Yep. So that's how I got
Yeah.
permanent residency. And then once you're there for a few years, it's too easy to get.
And was it pretty easy
citizenship.
for your wife then too, because you were there?
Yep.
Then I guess is that. So
Yeah.
that's the secret. Find somebody there, and you can,
Oh yeah. It's
Oh, yeah. It's like a green
marry somebody
card.
everywhere.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe.
So what brought you to Utah then? Did we get there yet? We haven't
we
really
didn't
gotten
get
there.
there.
I know we're
And
kind of
this-
jumping all over the place,
Yeah.
but that's a podcast, I guess, right? I mean,
Yep.
Yeah, that's how it goes. Nature of the beast.
This is another one. It depends on how deep we want to go down this rabbit hole. The short version is I met a girl from here, and my wife is from here. Slightly longer version. Oh, geez, how much do we get into? Okay, we're in. We are all in. We're all in.
Down
Okay,
the rabbit
so
hole.
2008, coming up to Thanksgiving time, she had planned a trip for a yoga event.
to Salt Lake City.
I can't remember where that
Somewhere in
was,
Utah.
but it was in the U.S. and she was going to visit family
Okay.
while she was in the country. I can't remember all the details, but she just started feeling like, no, these people and their philosophy behind it, I don't think I want to be in it. And she canceled the class, but came on the trip anyway because she had the ticket, just figured she'd visit for Thanksgiving. She started having weird bruising and things happening that was hard to explain and some other strange health issues for a few weeks before the trip. And I was getting a little worried, but she's one of those not go to doctor type people. And got on the plane and, well, long story somewhat shorter, went to Nephi. She's from Nephi, where she was born, small
Okay.
town, Utah, and finally decided to go to the doctor there, and they took some blood tests and left the room for a long time and came back in and said, well, we know what's wrong. You have leukemia.
Ugh.
And she said, huh? I said, leukemia?
Yeah.
Wow.
Get in an ambulance. You're going up to a bigger hospital. And she said, oh, my sister's here. And they're like, no, you're getting an ambulance and you're going on fluids right now. And basically she was told you'll be dead in a few days
Oh my
from kidney
gosh.
failure. So it was an acute lymphoblastic leukemia, and
And when was this again? How
this
many?
was Thanksgiving 2008.
Okay, so
And
for
she's still
time
here,
frame
so
here,
the end of the story is
Good.
spoiled.
Sure. Well, no, I'm just okay.
Yeah. So, and I was still in Australia. I was actually in an airport between. We were together in Sydney, and she went off, and I had a little bit of work there, and then I was flying to Cairns, sort of halfway home, when I got the call that I'm in an ambulance right now. I have leukemia, and
Holy crap.
tried to plan the flight right back the other way to get out, but couldn't do it. So I spent one day sort of saying goodbye to people and wrapping up, not knowing when I was going to come back, if ever, and got on a plane the next day to come back. And there was a conspiracy. All these miracles worked together to make it all right, including that LDS hospital up in the avenues. It was like the one hospital west of the Mississippi doing the latest, greatest Dana-Farber research trial in exactly her type of leukemia, which she was a perfect candidate for. And they basically said, yeah, you'd be dead in a few days from kidney failure, so you're going into treatment right now. And it was 2 years of absolute hell. But
she made it out
all these years
the
later,
other side.
and she's declared cured. So,
Wow.
So that's how we ended up in Utah.
That's a rough way to exit.
Yeah.
And was that your first introduction to Utah then, really?
I visited a few times with her over the years
because
when we
of
were living in San
family
Diego.
and stuff like that.
Yep.
Do you miss San Diego at all?
In ways, yeah.
Because I don't know if you followed the. I know you said you've listened to a little bit of the podcast. I grew up in Ventura.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't hear that.
So I know I talked to Chrissy a lot. I miss.
He talks about it all the time.
Well, you know what I miss? I miss just. I'm not really a seasons guy like some of the Utahns. I love so many things about Salt Lake.
Mm-hmm.
I love so many things about Utah, but I could care less about seasons. I just like to be warm.
Yep.
I hate being cold.
Yep. Spoiled Southern Californians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
And I thrive on
I
the
have
cold,
memories
so.
of being a child on my birthday because I was born in December, running around barefoot in the backyard with my friends. Like.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you did in December. You didn't wear shoes. I don't even remember shoes that I was. I don't have memories.
You didn't
of,
own shoes. They
I
were too
didn't
expensive.
Own shoes, probably. Wore sandals.
That would be
Anyway,
nice.
this isn't my podcast. I realize it, but I do miss, like, even back to your Australia thing, the
that's
warmth
what-
and the
Just being able to be more in touch with the environment in a way. Just
yeah.
It's
year
harsh
round,
when
you
it
could
gets
just go
cold.
out. Yeah,
Just-
It's
'cause
hard
you
to get out. Yeah.
When the earth freezes and you have to just I don't know. Anyway,
Sand doesn't pile up on you don't have to shovel the sand off to get in your car in the morning.
And then the crazy drivers on the road, and okay. In Australia, here's a random: do people drive as much there, or is it vehicles?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
It's pretty similar. And where
in the
we were,
how would you say Aboriginian?
Aboriginal is what is usually
Aboriginal.
said.
Sorry.
People drive everywhere up there because
Yeah.
otherwise you're just sitting in one little spot. So everybody 4-wheel drive. So you got to have a good 4-wheel drive or you don't go anywhere.
Sure.
So yeah, it was great. Actually, I was going to say this earlier that on the subject of being a suburban boy ending up over in the middle of nowhere, I really came to like that. It's not overwhelming. It's sort of at other times you do miss a variety of culture. We had a whole lot of one culture, but actually not long before we moved there. In San Diego, I don't know how many people knew this, but Ravi Shankar lived there in San Diego for most of his last 20 years or something like that. And there was a lot of Indian music scene around there.
Sure.
So, a week before we left, something like that, we were at this Indian music concert and just reflected
pretty
on
cool.
This is the last other culture
Yeah,
we're going to
'cause
get a
once you
taste
went
of for a while.
There, it was really solely just that culture that you were getting engulfed in.
Although it was interesting, on the other hand, that part of being the didgeridoo expert on the scene at the origin was that all the other people from around the world who were most interested in it would end up there too. So I did make great friends from Japan and Switzerland and all over the world.
It's a great way to find
being
like-minded
there.
people.
Yeah, that's a fact.
So then do you feel like you have a lack of culture? I mean, Utah's awesome. It has such amazing things, but one thing that I think a lot of people feel is there's not as much diversity here. Mm-hmm. Do you ever feel that way, or have you kind of adapted to it?
I think I've kind of adapted to it. Yeah.
You just fit in. You're just another white boy now.
Yep. We haven't talked about one of the things I do music for indie film.
Oh,
and there's actually one not many people heard of, but a couple years ago, there's a feature as a shout out to Lonzo and crew, an indie feature called Stop Pepper Palmer that was made locally. It was a comedy feature about the 3 black guys in Utah.
Really?
And
we're gonna have to track this down.
The life, it's in Redbox and stuff.
Is
so
it
it was like
really?
the only 3 black guys in Utah, and they have their own little chapter of the NAACP. And then a black woman moves to town, and
they all fight over her.
Except that they don't know how to be black enough because they've grown up in Utah. So
this sounds
it's
like
a good
we need
premise.
a screening of this movie.
And what was it? What was the name of that movie?
Stop Pepper Palmer.
Stop Pepper Palmer.
We got to hit up some red boxes tonight.
I maybe.
Yeah. Interesting. And then you did the music for that.
Yeah.
So do you do a lot of music for films then?
Yeah, but I've been doing that. So this is part of my mysterious life path. That's kind of what I wanted to do when I was young, inspired by Star Wars, and anybody near my age who gets into film music pretty much talks about Star Wars. But while I was studying music composition in college, I got introduced to this didgeridoo thing, and then it took my life on this tangent in that direction, which I pretty much went as far as you can go with it. And then while I was there working at this art center, they got funding to build a new multimedia wing, and said, "Oh, well, with your experience in music recording and stuff and academia, you should go run this new multimedia wing," which was partly to archive old stuff, like repatriating things from anthropologists and missionaries to have a community accessible archive of photos and sound recordings of their elders and stuff like that, which was very cool to be a part of.
Really cool.
But also training the people today to tell their own story from now on rather than having outsiders tell the story. So I was having filmmaking workshops, and then a couple times that, well, I should do some music for that film. And then I got encouragement from some of the professional Aussie mentors that we had coming in to teach film classes. And then suddenly, before I thought like, oh, well, all these things in my life led to this destination in Australia doing this thing. And then suddenly I was shifted back over here. But after being sort of turned back around to film music over there. And so when I got here and needed something to do with myself,
you were that's
what I do now.
Yeah.
Wow. So is that kind of your full-time thing there? I mean, because you're doing all kinds of things, and we didn't even get into it. I mean, you even teach didgeridoo lessons, and you make them, and
I don't make them.
Oh, you don't? For some reason,
I'm sure.
Well, I've assisted. I've talked about this a lot with people ask, like, this is an authentic one made by Aboriginal people with me, and people ask me, oh, did you make your own while you were there? And I usually say no, because the hardest thing, we haven't even talked about what they are really. That's a trunk of a eucalyptus tree.
Oh, wow.
That has been hollowed out by termites. So you actually go walking through the forest looking for likely sizes and shapes with the blunt end of the axe. You go, boom, hit the tree, listening for the resonance of the hollow, and they check download. They check for just what they want for the shape before chopping it down. So, dear listeners, if you could see it, it's a fairly conical.
Well, and I'm going to post pictures on at iamsaltlake.com with this episode.
Okay, cool.
So it's not really an instrument you make per se.
There's a lot of work after. So I was going to say it's pretty conical, but what they did, the tree itself wouldn't have been. So they're actually trying to find a conical hollow inside this more uniform diameter tree. And then chop it down. It's a living tree that gets chopped down, and then you carve it down to the hollow that you wanted to find inside.
Okay. Wow.
So the real hardest part of it and the art of it is finding that right tree that you want.
Yeah.
Instead of just chopping down trees till you find a good one.
Is there like a story behind how they originally decided to start chopping down eucalyptus trees and making instruments out of the middle of them?
Yeah, there are several.
We keep going back to this didgeridoo. I feel bad. It's just intriguing.
We'll talk about your life too, I promise.
it's part of creation story for them. And I'm just trying to figure out how to tell this in any way briefly. There are different clans there that all sort of, and there's kind of like two halves to the culture. And so with like two completely different mythologies and creation stories, and different clans within each half share their part of the story. So there's, on the different sides, there's different origin stories to it. I mean, on one side, on my adopted clan, they have a story about a certain place called Gulkala. And this is a very public story. It's been told on websites and stuff, so I don't mind telling this. Of an ancestor named Ganbulapula, who was a giant in the old days. And basically, they also have a thing, a bigger, older tree that's the same as the didgeridoo. Yay big, much taller, but the same tree, hollowed out by the same termites, is used as a coffin for bones of deceased people. Like after the body has decayed, they paint the bones, put them in there, and the log is painted with the most sacred designs of that person's lineage. Wow. So without going into too much, basically this giant in the ancestral times blew through this log that he had knocked down and made the first sound of the didgeridoo, which called people to funeral ceremony, which was, his own. And so there's this sort of parallel between all these different things, the giant with this giant tube. And so, and I'll say that very first sound was...
He's going to play it here for us here.
It's really simple.
Like a war horn.
Yeah.
But for a funeral.
Yep. So that's more, like a horn or a trumpet type sound. And so that was a call to ceremony. So that is still done. So there's normal didgeridoo. I'll play again for a second. So
just so I can get a picture of you playing it. Yeah.
In traditional ceremony and song, basically, I should have brought Bilma. There's wooden clapsticks. So there'll be several senior people banging clapsticks and singing the song, one didgeridoo player. And the traditional sort of rhythm sounds kind of like this. Let's see, what will we do?
That looks super hard.
Oh my gosh.
So that's just a little segment of like traditional song for a brolga, kind of crane-like bird, but there would be people singing and going and doing imitations of the animal. But if it's this ceremony for Gunbulapo, there'd be the normal stuff, and then another guy walking around just going playing that call to ceremony. So that's just part of, like I said, there's different stories for different clans.
Right. Kind of like the different mythologies.
Yeah.
But okay. Wow.
Just so we don't completely run out of time here, I want to talk about your. I could ask you. I want to talk about some other stuff too before we completely run out of time. You're doing another like band, Sidecar Judy. We got to mention some of your other stuff you're doing.
Basically, I have three basic hats in my life these days. There's the film composer hat, the didgeridoo hat, and this duo called Sidecar Judy,
which I love the music I heard of.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome. We were watching some
your
actually.
Patreon videos, like I dug it.
Thanks.
Like, this is cool.
Oh yeah, I saw you guys on Patreon too.
Yeah.
You should support all of us on Patreon.
Okay. Well, you brought. What do you think of Patreon? I think it's a great way to support people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and do you think it's still catching on? Do you think a lot of people aren't familiar with Patreon?
Yeah, I think I know every time I've told anybody about it, I've had to explain the whole thing.
Yeah,
so
because they understand Kickstarter and GoFundMe and all of that.
I think specific groups of people understand Patreon.
Pretty much broadly, artists who are all trying to use it.
Pretty much, yeah, that's kind of the group.
What I love about it is like $1. It's like you can support somebody for $1, and it's like if all of their supporters supported $1, think of all the projects that could be done. Anyway, Sidecar Judy, we don't need to get off on a tangent on Patreon.
Check it out on Patreon.
So this is a duo with Cami Meitler now. This is kind of a fun story too of our meeting. I actually spent all of 2014. Okay, going back, I had two hats. I had the didgeridoo hat and the film composer hat, and really just decided sort of end of 2013, early 2014, I just want to play normal music with people and for people and, affect people directly like that and just jam with people, play with people.
Sure.
And I spent the whole year, I've spent, 20 years as a decent guitarist. And I thought, I've never really, really worked at really hard stuff to be a great guitarist. So I spent all 2014 just like taking all the hardest songs that I had played the cheap way, like just sort of like, I'll jam that song, but I won't really learn it right. So just like really challenging myself and watching the Musicians Wanted ads all year long. And just like I wasn't interested in another cover band. I wasn't interested in there's a lot of metal bands, a lot of the same stuff going on around here. And I met a few people, but nothing really clicked. And then Cami here was at BYU, Idaho.
Oh.
And one night just kind of felt a calling, moved to Salt Lake and pursue music.
Really?
And her grandmother, who is Judy, by the way.
Can I take a look at that? I just want
lived here, so she had a place, and so she moved here, put out an ad on Craigslist with some of her old recordings. I found it, said, "Oh, that sounds interesting, intriguing." It wasn't like what I was looking for in any way,
but it was a neat original music idea.
Yeah, and so I thought that could be interesting, and she sent me a video of a new song, just her strumming and singing it, and I instantly thought, oh, I know what that needs. It needs all these ascending lines on top of it. And then we met for the first time the next day, played it for her. She said, yeah, that was great. What do we do? And I just looked at my, film composer studio and said, we start recording that. And so the day we met, we started recording the song Sandy, which is on there. So it was just kind of really quickly happen.
Do you play out at all, like in Salt Lake?
We haven't been because also... So we met in January 2015, and then in February she announced she was going out of town for a long summer sales job.
As you do when you live in Utah sometimes.
Yep. So we recorded almost everything for this first CD before she left, and I mixed it. I did all of that work while she was away. And then when she got back at the end of the summer, we started working on promotion stuff. We did a couple of house concerts, things like that, and a couple of open mics. But we haven't really done much. And so then when she got back, we started working on the promotion. We were recording new stuff, and we got onto Patreon. And then so our plan was, okay, there's only two of us. We had a hard time finding other people. Actually, that was part of the original story behind the recording too, was just as a startup, we couldn't find people. We couldn't find quality people to join us as a startup. And we were told by a lot of people, yeah, everybody who's really good is getting paid for something and isn't interested in startups. Can't be totally true, but we didn't find the right people right away. So we just said, we'll just record ourselves.
Yeah.
And then people will want to play with us. But then you run into there's the catch-22. Then people say, well, I don't want to just, they say, oh yeah, you guys are good. I want to play with you. And then once you try, they say, but I don't want to just like play what you guys are. I don't want to just play like the recording.
Yeah, they want to be part of the creation process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, but you wouldn't join us when we were creating it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Create new stuff. Play the old stuff the right way.
So we just decided to do the Patreon thing and do videos together as a duo and with the other people as we could get them to sign up. And so and then she announced she was going to do it again the next summer. So we spent the 6 months that we had recording new stuff and getting enough videos shot so that I could keep releasing 2 a month.
Sure.
For the
while she's
5
gone.
months she was away.
Wow.
So we've been doing 2 videos a month all year. And so now that she's back and says she's not going to go away again, we have our bass player and we're working on getting it together so that hopefully we can be performing out and about soon, but we have not been.
And people listening, can they go to sidecarjudy.com, the website, and listen, I guess, to music?
Yeah.
Find out. I mean, probably
and those
even
2 videos
buy
a
the
month.
CD,
They're all
right?
on. Yep, the CD is available.
And
actually,
I'll put
the CD is not. We just have like a few copies ourselves.
Okay.
But it's on Amazon, iTunes, all that, and all those 2 videos a month are all on YouTube.
And I'll put links to your Patreon and all that on the show notes.
YouTube channel and
for the website. What else do you do music wise? I mean, what is there? I don't know. Are we hitting everything? I feel like I want to touch so much.
You do a lot of things.
I do.
You know, and we have such a short amount of time to really chat.
I know. That's the hard part. How long? I mean, do you feel comfortable in Utah? Are you very settled into Salt Lake and really gaining ground, being a musician? And
I'm trying to do more
here?
so part of the thing of being the indie film composer was, well, first of all, you spend a lot of time by yourself. So I'm sitting in my basement studio most of the time. So you interact with the filmmakers and sort of because you're fulfilling their vision. And sometimes you have a budget to work with other musicians, although most of the time it's just whatever I can play or doing fake orchestra stuff in the computer.
Yeah.
So that's fairly solitary. So I was not getting connected with the local music scene at all. So this Sidecar Judy project is more of trying to get out. And I'm trying to do that with the Didgeridoo more too now. Because that was also fairly.
Does that get tough to be like, you know, work in solitude, long hours? I mean, do you? Yeah,
it kind of does. Yeah,
or is it more your personality?
I'm pretty happy to do it for the most part. But like I said, I was starting to feel a yearning to just like play with people, as opposed to like do the work. At the computer by myself.
And there's such a great music scene. It's actually pretty diverse around here. So it's nice.
I'm getting to know that now.
Yeah. So have you gotten out and really started to meet a lot more local musicians? And
I mentioned we have a bass player signing up now, and Dave. Hi, Dave. So he's been much more in this scene around here for a while. So he's bringing more people to us to check out. And
that's really cool.
Yeah. So
it's a very supportive scene. I think you'll enjoy it.
Oh, I hope so.
If you could learn to play any instrument, what would you like to learn to play? A dream instrument.
I'm calling myself done.
Really? There's not one like out there. You're like, gosh, I would love to learn how to play the saxophone or something.
Or sitar.
There you go.
Unless you already play that.
I don't. I haven't mentioned the koto, the Japanese zither sort of. There was a class at UCSD when I was there, so I learned that. But
that's
I don't
not the air
it.
thing, right?
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah, I don't think.
So you're done.
There is. Yeah, I feel like
you're done.
A lot of my life was spent as a jack of all trades, and I still do. Like this recording is me on guitar and bass and keyboards and backing vocals and yeah, I just I feel like I want to specialize now. I've got enough.
You've tried enough.
Yeah. There are times when I wish I could play the drums for myself for our own recordings, but I'm not talented there, and I should not do that. Somebody else who's good at that should do that.
So we ask people that come on here, favorite things about living in Salt Lake. Is there anything that you do like about living? You do like about living?
I do like the mountain. I miss the ocean very, very much.
Yeah.
But I do like the mountains, and finally got myself, my wife and I we were on a strict, at least weekly hiking church, we called it. Go Sunday mornings when, and it's less busy on a lot of the popular trails. Mm-hmm. So we did really get out this summer better than we had in the past. So that was really great. And as you said, there is an active music culture, and on every level, there's a sort of underground music culture, and there's a great symphony. And I mean, one of the few full-time symphonies left in the country is here. So yeah, there's a lot. I'm actually also involved in the Salty Cricket Composers Collective. Recently became a board member of that. And
what is that?
Salty
Cricket.
It's a new music nonprofit. It does two main things. Oh, I'm really doing my job as a board member now. I didn't even plan this at all.
Well, you brought it up.
I did. For most of its time so far, it has been just about creating concerts of new music by Utah composers perform. And it's usually the tradition, we're changing it up a little now, but the tradition has been that there was one sort of multimedia electronics mixed with live performance concert. There was one vocal concert, like they've been sort of not quite ready for Broadway type concerts or operatic, and then two invented ensembles. So actually we did a string quartet and didgeridoo concert. So we just put out the call.
So fun to see
for composers. This is the ensemble. Please submit your pieces by this date. And it has been, now it's running at the Urban Arts Gallery is where the performances are now. So 4 times a year.
And is there a website people can find out more about all this salty cricket?
Ooh, I should really know what it is, but
Maybe I'll
search
Google
salty
it
cricket.
before I put this up. I can put it with the show notes.
Yeah, I really should know that, but I don't. But there's a Facebook page for it and everything, Salty Cricket Composers.
And I'll try to link those, yeah.
But the second part of it that is fairly new, just celebrated its 1-year anniversary, is an education program. So at a West Side school providing low-cost, you could basically call it a youth orchestra, just all these students, mostly Mexican-American kids, learning violin and playing together as an ensemble.
And like in a time of the world where the arts are being yanked from schools, it's really cool to hear that someone's actually giving back and putting it back in that way.
And we're trying to build it, and the idea is, local composer types have this venue to perform, to have their new music performed while also working as teachers for young students, mostly from a different socioeconomic background.
Yeah.
So it's a cool thing. It's a growing nonprofit.
That's very
Salty
cool.
Cricket Composers Collective.
What about favorite local eating spots? I ask that one a lot as well. Is there one or two places? I'm sure you eat somewhere, right?
Yeah, well, being that it is Taco Tuesday today, my wife and I are very much mourning the loss of the Blue Poblano.
I don't know.
Blue Poblano.
Where was that at?
That's probably it's where Sages used to be on...
okay, right on 300 South there. The Blue... How long ago was
the Al Pastor Taco? It was just a couple of weeks ago. It shut down very suddenly. I think there's a mystery there. They said emergency repair. It shut down very suddenly, but yeah, we were.
They took over the Sages. Where
it used to be Sages.
Yeah,
Sages
up the steps right next door to Dick and Dixie's there.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a favorite that sadly just disappeared. But one we absolutely love. We live in the Avenues, and the Avenues Bistro is fantastic.
Oh my gosh, that place is great.
So we're 4 blocks away. So just every once in a while, we don't know what we're doing. Let's walk down to the bistro. That place is fantastic.
And isn't all their stuff like organically grown in the back?
A lot of it is
all locally sourced.
Yeah, because the owner lives like the next house over, and so like, the garden spreads all the way around from her house to there, and all locally sourced, and
that's a great recommendation.
And some really, really freaking good French fries.
Yeah. Well, I always ask that on the show. Partially because I like to know where people eat, and partially because there's so much great local eating here.
There is. Actually, that is one of my big surprises about Salt Lake in moving here. It's just like, there's a lot of good food.
Yeah.
Especially, within a couple mile radius of city center, particularly. But,
there's some diversity here. It just happens to be in the food area.
Yeah. The foodies rejoice.
Yep.
So what? Anything else? We got a few minutes left here. Why we have you? That we didn't. I mean, we talked about your music. We briefly touched. So people listening have more questions on the didgeridoo. I mean, I'll put your website. Well, what are the best websites, links to get a hold of you? I guess I'll let you promote yourself.
Okay.
Here.
Yeah. For the 3 hats, there are 3 websites. So for film music, it's randingraves.com, just my name. For didgeridoo stuff, it's gingerroot.com, which is my old record label I started with. Actually, the first other didgeridoo player I ever met back in San Diego. We started Ginger Root Records together. And sidecarjudy.com for the band, which hopefully, play out the show with a song or something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what I was going to actually ask you. We'll end this podcast with a Sidecar Judy song. I'll let you tell us which song we'll play.
All right.
But I'll put those links on the website. People can get a hold of you. Did I read somewhere, and I might have mentioned, gosh, I apologize, if they want to take lessons, didgeridoo, find out more about it. Is there, you're probably one of the only people in this area that play the didgeridoo.
There are a few.
There's a few?
There are a few, but it's hard to say this without sounding egotistical, but...
Nobody's as good as you.
Well, nobody went to the ends of the earth to really study it like I did.
It's a solid point.
I can honestly say that I'm one of like a handful. You can count on one hand the people in the world.
Yeah.
You'd want to learn. So there's a lot of things that I'm awful at. There's a lot. I'm really, I'm not great at math. But this. if you
know
want to
your
learn about
didgeridoo.
this, you should come to me. Sure.
Totally.
Well, I think, unless there's anything else you want to add, Chrissy or Randin.
What do you want written on your gravestone?
Oh my gosh.
Let's go dark for a minute.
I don't need one.
Okay.
My wife and I have actually talked about, we did estate planning, and there is one mortuary company here that has, they're licensed to use this sort of natural place where you can just be like thrown in a wicker basket and buried in this natural area. Huh. And that sounds good to me.
Just become one with the earth.
Yeah, I don't need a marker. I don't need the illusion of permanence on this planet.
What Sidecar Judy song should we end this episode out? I'll stitch it in at the end there so people can hear it.
Oh, it's such a hard question. Do we want to go folky or rock? Let's go edgier and go with Eating Stars.
Eating Stars?
Yeah.
Like I said, we'll put that in at the end of this episode. Check it out, sidecarjudy.com. We'll put all the links at iamsaltlake.com. Thank you, Randin.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chrissy. We didn't even mention Britt from Etch a Sketch. Britt West was sitting in on this interview, so thank you so much, Britt, for sitting in on this
providing that
episode.
support.
Providing the support. Thank you, everybody, for listening. You have a good night.
You too.
What a fun conversation with Randin Graves. Head on over to iamsaltlake.com/250. It's for episode 250. We're going to put all the links and whatnot to get in touch with him. Like we said in the interview, we're going to close out this podcast episode here in just a few minutes with his band Sidecar Judy, Eating Stars. It's from the CD Music for Humans. So we're going to play that song at the very end of this episode.
I like the name of that album.
It's
Music for Humans.
It's not normally like, I don't know. I love the music though. It's a really good album, and typically I'm not one to just venture outside of my little circles. But this is so good.
It is. When we watched their Patreon video, I was entranced.
Yeah, and so I'm glad I was able to get one of the CDs when I had him here in the office and to chat with him. But speaking of the website, speaking of iamsaltlake.com 250 for the links and whatnot, you're working on the website.
I am working on the website. So be patient with me.
Okay, my question for you, Chrissy, is do you regret now? Okay, so the old website was beautiful. Uh-huh. You did that a year ago.
Right.
Last December.
Every Christmas I make a new website for I Am Salt Lake. That's a tradition.
Is that the tradition now? And so, it was a beautiful website. It was much better than anything I ever had in the past. I would always go after the free WordPress templates. That was just what I did. Do you regret starting now with a new design?
I don't, because I redid it for you as a Christmas present last year without having a full understanding of what the website should do. I just made it pretty.
Well, what should a website do?
Well, a podcast website. This is what we've been debating for about a year. What do the listeners want it to do? Will you guys please email me and tell me what you want?
Yeah.
But we really want to focus on having players that are easy to find.
I think that's the biggest thing. A lot of podcasts, I visit a lot of podcast websites, and a lot of times you can't even find the player, and you're like, well, how am I supposed to listen to this podcast?
Yep.
Because sometimes you just want to listen to it right there on the computer.
Exactly. Like you just want to, and that's what I do with even the bigger podcasts that don't put them out enough out on iTunes, like
Your mind's
This
going
American
blank.
Life.
Oh, This American.
I was trying to think of the logo. This American Life. I'll go to their website and play stuff like crazy, but their player is so tiny.
Yeah.
But I want our site to be completely intuitive, easy for anyone to visit, listen to an episode, find an episode, things like that.
Just easy to navigate.
And we'll make it beautiful too, but I'm working on functionality first.
Let us know your thoughts. Let Chrissy know your thoughts. Her email is chrissy@iamsaltlake.com.
KRISSIE @iamsaltlake.com.
So last night was our live show, Chrissy.
It was so much fun.
Anticipated. Every live show that we do, I get so worked up for it.
Oh, yeah. We were snappy a little bit.
And so last night was the live show at Hideout Pub and Grub. Jimmy Martin, Kat Martin, Rich Wilson, Aaron Orlovitz, they all showed up.
Yeah, that's a win.
You know what I mean? None of them flaked. Jimmy was in town, when I asked him to come on the live show, that was kind of the big thing, is he didn't know if you'd have to go out of town for a junket.
Yeah.
And so he's like, well, I don't know. I can't guarantee it. But I was so excited that he was able to make it.
Yeah, it was he was a lot of fun. Actually, they were all a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was going to say they were all a lot of fun. It was a little bit, and I want to touch a little. We'll mention it again, and because we're planning on putting up that show up next Sunday for next week's episode. But it was a bit of chaos.
It was massive chaos.
When we got there, we were planning. The live show was supposed to start at 9:00. You and I were like, well, let's get there at 7. We can sit, because we have to set up there's so many behind the scenes stuff.
Yes, and it was only us doing it.
Yeah, exactly. We have to do it all ourselves. We're not only conduct the interview. We had to, I had to bring my own cable cords for microphones, bring our own microphones, set that all up into a PA system that I don't know anything about.
Right.
We get there at 7:00 and it's paint night.
It was packed. We couldn't even find a place to park.
Full of old ladies that were painting pictures of a bird, and I'm like, who does this at a bar?
Well, I've always wanted to do wine and painting,
but none of them even looked like they were drinking. Did you notice that none of them were drinking?
No, only a few were. But yeah, you're right. You're right.
So I was like, well, how is that even good for the bar?
And there were like 1 million of them.
Yeah.
There were so many.
And then so the owner that we set the show up, he was a nice guy. He was like, oh yeah,
super good dude.
They should be out of here by 7:30, and then it's like 8:00 and
they're all taking pictures and
like, good,
walking around.
And we already had people showing up for the show.
Yeah.
And by 8:00, I wanted to be able to sit back and relax and have a drink.
Right. Because we wanted to just spend time with the listeners before we even started the podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I apologize if you're listening right now and you came out to the live show and it was a little bit hectic when you got there. And then we ran into some technical difficulties with the PA system.
Yeah.
Which we'll I want to kind of chat about it on the next episode.
Yeah.
Some more, but it was a great turnout.
It was. And
I mean, really, for a podcast, for a couple of hooligans like you and I.
And it was so cool because like everyone who came out meant so much to us.
Oh, yeah.
And it was so nice to see them and give them hugs and talk to them. And you guys are amazing.
I remember each
So
person
great.
who comes out to the live shows.
Me
I want to
too.
give a special shout out to Michelle for bringing us some VHS tapes. I mean, this is awesome that we have a listener out there that knows that we collect VHS tapes and brought us a couple.
And a little birdie told me she has a birthday card for you that's coming in the mail soon.
Well, we don't need to get into that right now. But yeah, like I said in the beginning of this episode, my 39th birthday. Can you believe I don't feel that old, Chrissy.
Well, is that really old though nowadays? I mean, honestly, do you really think it's old?
I don't know. I don't.
I look
at sometimes these other people that are in their 40s and I'm like, man, they look tired. They look worn out.
Huh.
Like there's a guy I work with that's like just a few years older than me and his like whole body's just falling apart.
Really?
And I'm just like, good grief. Like where?
I think it's all about the spirit.
It scares me.
You have to act the age you want to be. You know?
I'm a few years away from my body just falling apart.
I'll put it back together.
Anyway, though, the live show. So much fun.
Yes, it was fun.
So great.
Join us next week to learn more.
Yeah, join us next week. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast in iTunes or Stitcher Radio. That way it'll get sent right through your feed and you'll get that live show up on there. There's a few ways to support the podcast. I want to tell you, first and foremost, leave us a review on iTunes. This really helps the show out immensely. A lot of people don't know the importance of an iTunes review.
It's really, really helpful. And if I see you when you give an iTunes review, I'll give you a high five.
Oh, there you go.
I know you want one.
It takes just a second, and I love to read what people have to say about the show.
Me too.
And it bumps us up in the iTunes rating, gets the show exposed to more people. It's a great way to support the show. You can also share this episode or any episode or just the website. Just share the podcast on Facebook and Twitter. Mm-hmm. It's a great way to get the word out. You can also support the podcast by becoming a Patreon of support. Go to iamsaltlake.com/supporter to find out more information about Patreon and our Patreon and the cool rewards that you get for doing that.
Yeah.
You want to run down the contact information, Chrissy?
Absolutely. You can find us at iamsaltlake.com. We're also on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Snapchat, all at iamsaltlake. And we have a mailing address, 2225 South, 500 East, Suite 16, Salt Lake City, 84106.
And then there's a voicemail or text line. I'm going to keep pushing this out there. Maybe we'll get phone calls, voicemails. Well, we never answer it. I mean, this is just a dedicated voicemail and texting line. 385-202-5926. Anything more you want to add to this episode before we play this Sidecar Judy song?
Yeah, I want to re-mention that if you mail us anything at our mailing address, I'll write you a handwritten letter back. Because someone actually called me out on that last night, and she said she expects one. Michelle did, yeah. Great. She's an amazing listener. Great friend.
We love her. We love you. So, yeah, I mean, it's all about communication here. It really is. I mean, let's make it two-sided.
Totally. We'd love to hear anything.
And I know I'm not always the best with it. I'll be the first to admit it. But anyway, let's play Eating Stars, or Sidecar Judy. Great band, sidecarjudy.com. Thank you so much, Randin Graves, for joining us on this episode. Great conversation. Thank you for listening. You guys have a great week.
Good night, Grammy.
That they play. it's straight I loved you. From that day that you last saw the moon, you said I love you, then you kissed me on the cheek. And we don't have to play pretend like everyone we grew up with did, because love isn't a piece of paper, it's our home. We don't have time to follow all these rules. Our parents, politicians, and leaders, they can't save us now. No one can save us as we watch the stars fall to the ground. Look into my eyes and see the last thing that you'll see while you're alive. Do you know what it is? Do you know what it is? And we don't have much time, so can you just be mine? Can you just be